As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually connected, let us take a moment to reflect the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognise the various traditional lands on which we meet this evening. For many of us, that is the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging of all the lands we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. And we extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who join us this evening. Welcome to the first virtual Bridge Darebin Town Hall. For those that don't know much about us, Bridge Darebin is a trusted not-for-profit community organisation located in Preston and Thornbury. And for over 38 years, our mission has remained steadfast. We exist to strengthen our community by providing social and educational services to empower those who need it most. In recent years, we've demonstrated great leadership in innovation, social enterprise, adult education, community engagement and the environment. And we pride ourselves on inclusive and impartial practices. And to that end, we felt it was important, even with current restrictions, to offer our community an opportunity to hear from some of the candidates in the upcoming council elections. So here we are. And to just reiterate, our motivation in proposing tonight's forum was all about community connection. It certainly was not about individual candidates and all the parties they represent. Bridge Darebin is first and foremost here to serve our community. I'm Chris Lombardo, CEO of Bridge Darebin, and thank you for coming this evening. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening, Bridge Darebin General Manager Ramona Barry. Good evening, Ramona.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for everyone attending the Bridge Darebin Meet Your Candidates virtual forum. My name is Ramona Barry, General Manager at Bridge Darebin, and I'll be your moderator for the event. Before I explain how this evening will proceed, I want to touch on our speaker selection process. Every candidate with details listed on the VEC website was contacted via email with an invitation to speak. The first 7 to reply from different parties or independents were selected. To ensure that all parties and wards would be represented, an additional 4 candidates were chosen with an online randomiser, thus providing 11 speakers for the evening. This was deemed the most fair and impartial process, with a pool of 60 candidates and the time limitations of the forum tonight. As a community organisation, we are always mindful of remaining impartial. Our priority is to provide an opportunity for our community as a whole to engage with at least a portion of the candidates in a direct way. And we hope that this process will provide the fairest framework for tonight's proceedings. Each speaker has been assigned a number from 1 to 11, determining tonight's running order. They've been told this in advance, and you can now see this running order in the chat section to the right of your Zoom screen. All questions for candidates must be typed in the Q&A section. If you wish a guaranteed response, please also provide your email address. We won't get through all of the questions tonight, it's not possible. If your question is not answered this evening, it will be forwarded to the relevant candidate. Each candidate will have the floor for 3 minutes. At the 2.5-minute mark, our timekeeper, Isabel, will interject with a 30-second warning. At 3 minutes, the candidate will then be muted. I'll then introduce the following candidate. When all candidates have had the floor for 3 minutes, we will attend to questions. Every endeavour will be made to allow each candidate to answer at least 1 question in that original order of 1 to 11. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds to answer that question. They will then be muted, and the next question will be directed to the appropriate candidate. Candidate, please note, this is not a debate setting and retorts will not be aired in this forum this evening. In closing, if proceedings have not stretched too far over time, each candidate in the original 1 to 11 order will be given 1 minute for closing remarks. Many thanks in advance to the candidates and those of you attending. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Esther Kennedy, Greens candidate for Central Ward. You have the floor.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Esther Kennedy. I'm the Greens endorsed candidate for Central Ward. I work in economic development at a nearby council, so mostly supporting and advocating for traders with a focus on retail precincts. Before that, I worked in the arts. I worked on a creative placemaking project in Louisiana in the USA in a severely disadvantaged downtown area. And for about 10 years before that, I was the owner of a writers agency. I've spoken a lot during this campaign about being a small business advocate. I believe small businesses, home-based business, family business, and especially artists and creatives add so much to the livability and vibrancy of Darebin. And that shopping streets that are welcoming to the whole community with shops where you get a smile and hello when you come in. This creates a social connection, local job opportunities, and a community resilience that's sort of impossible to get in any other way. I'm passionate about the right kind of economic growth, and I believe prosperity is worthless if it's not shared by all, and sustainable in every sense of what that word means. And that's why I've been with the Greens for over a decade as a supporter and now as a candidate, as I have a long range vision for what our society and environment should look like and a plan for how to get there. I became a mum last year. I live in Preston with my daughter and partner. We're just getting to know the playgrounds now that they're open up again, to sort of at that point. Running for council because I think local government is really important, but it's also a really overlooked tier of government. I think it has an opportunity to have a big impact on our happiness. I've worked in local government for the last 6 years, and that's helped me to develop an understanding and appreciation for how decisions are made, how those decisions affect our day-to-day lives. So I want to see, I think it's important to see my values reflected on council, and I concluded that one way to do that would be to run as a candidate. My priorities are cooling and greening Darebin through tree planting and expanding access to green space, continuing to be a climate leader, and economic recovery that puts our shopping streets, small businesses and artists at the forefront. So that's kind of my bit in a nutshell. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Esther. That's fantastic. Now, Louise Kenney-Shen, Labor Party candidate for North Central Ward. You have the floor.
Thanks very much. Obviously, I'm Louise Kenney-Shen, running in the North Central Ward. I am a Labor Party member, running without endorsement this year, this time. I decided to run in this election because I've identified a few things in the area since I moved in 3 years ago. And I think that there are a lot of different things in Darebin that I can address, and there are a lot of things I have to offer to the community. I have a background in cross-cultural relations and education. So I've worked overseas. I ran an early childhood education centre overseas, which ended up becoming quite large, which I was quite happy with. And it offered scholarships and things to people from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds in that part of China. And from starting with that, it really helped me to appreciate the work that groups like Bridge and also other neighbourhood houses around the area do in terms of opening doors and making things available to people in the community who might not have a lot of options. Let's be honest about it. So in terms of this my platform that I'm running on, obviously economic recovery coming out of COVID is going to take the forefront of most people's plans, and I think that that's really important, not just from a household budgeting and sort of making sure everyone's looked after perspective, but it's also in terms of creating jobs and creating spaces within Darebin that we can use to boost up our economy, but also make sure that it's being done in a way that's fair and distributed evenly across everybody. So things like places like Darebin Bridge and the other neighbourhood houses, other outreach groups in the area do a really fantastic job of making sure that everybody in the community has the access to this kind of help. And so the things like the education and training is something that I signed up at Reservoir Neighbourhood House to assist with those things and homework groups, but unfortunately COVID, and they're not running those at the moment, which is a big shame. But I think that it's really important, especially with what we've seen over the last 6 months, that we empower our organisations within Darebin to be that, to grow the offering that they have and to be a conduit for the community of a better family kind of feeling within Darebin, that everyone's together. So that's working in tandem with council, other organisations, state government, the federal government where applicable. Those kind of those
30 seconds remaining.
connections are really important to make sure that things like Bridge are working well. Obviously, there's other platforms that I'm running on, but I thought I'd keep it relevant to Bridge this evening because that's why we're here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Louise. Isabel Jackson, Labor candidate for West Ward, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a Labor member of the Australian Labor Party, and we're not endorsed, but I'm very proud to say I'm a member of the Australian Labor Party. And actually, I was just looking at my backdrop, and it struck me the irony, although it's to protect you from the side of my back room. A picture of the universe is actually quite opposite to the kind of platform or interest that I have. My current employment, I'm a sessional academic at the University of Melbourne. I've been a teaching associate there for 12 years now. And in that, every year, I tend to meet with and engage with between 150 to up to about 300 students, which I just adore. And I was just surprised. I was just thinking about this afternoon how many they are, and I just love it. But one of the things that's involved with that is facilitating their desires for their education and how they see themselves in the world as undergrads and also as graduate students through master's qualifications. I also do some research assistance work. And that type of thing, I realised, I'm thinking, so why do I want to be a counsellor? I'd say my whole life is about facilitating people's ambitions to get them where they want to be. I can't say that I have any overarching ambitions or projects that I really want to stick and say, do this. But I do recognise the area of housing. I'm in sociology. I'm very engaged with the idea of identity and identity presentation and culture. I used to my degree is studio-based fine arts. I worked as a curator for a long time, involved with the performing arts, and all those factors of self-fulfillment. But we have to have the means to do that. We have to have adequate and safe housing. We have to have access to meaningful employment. We have to have access to education. All of those support our health. Without those four in tandem, but for me, housing's the most important, really we don't have anything. So my interest primarily is about reliable, safe housing and the supporting infrastructure around that, because for me, that supports the development and maintenance of communities. This is my academic research work as well. And this is my commitment, I suppose, to local government. I've worked in local government myself as an arts officer in regional galleries and museums, and places like the Bridge, which I just adore. So happy to be able to come along tonight to this.
Candidate, you have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Because of the work they do, the obvious visible work through programs, and all the intangible work that goes through that. So as a counsellor, certainly my aim would be to assist people fulfil their own ambitions for their neighbourhood.
Thank you, Isabel. Carmen Lahiff-Jenkins, Reason Party candidate for North West Ward, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Before I say anything, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people on whose lands I particularly work and live. Pay my respects to elders past, present, and just acknowledge that sovereignty of this land was never ceded. I live in Reservoir with my partner Hamish, who's a local firefighter. My sons Iggy and Quinn, who are 20 and 17, which is a really tricky but also very fabulous age group. My heritage is Italian. I'm a Super King gardener with a huge productive veggie garden. Everybody that walks past whenever I'm out there is always coming over to have a look, except in COVID, staying part, which I've got bees, chooks, I've got fruit trees. I'm the first person in my family to go to university, and this privilege has afforded me a wonderful career as a medical editor and educator working in neuroscience research for an international NGO based in stroke and cerebrovascular diseases. I've got a background in policy development, and I'm the policy convener for the Reason Party with Fiona Patton. Because of that background, I've got a real passion for evidence-based policies, and I think approaching governance with evidence is something that I'm most passionate about. As a local representative, and I am truly local because I live in Reservoir, I love Reservoir. I bought a house here 7 years ago, which is, I feel very lucky to have been able to do. And anyone who lives out in this area knows the blocks are huge, hence my millions of fruit trees. The minute I arrived here, we started planting. So I've also got a real passion for trust and transparency. I think that's really important. I think as Australians, we're all pretty sick of the strange events around politics. I like the idea of people being kind to each other, using empathy and working together to come to ends. Obviously, council has got some, I guess you could call them unsexy things that they manage, but they are incredibly important things that we touch on every single day in our lives. You know, so for me, I think making sure that we're aware of what council is doing and being connected to council is really important. So I'd really like to see the initiation of a newspaper and some seed funding from council so that we can re-establish a newspaper in Darebin, which will, instead of, you know, having to go out to a Murdoch paywall, which is currently the process with local newspapers. I think it's really important the initiation of an emergency mode for us to start acting like our house is on fire. I think a lot of us would agree we're all really worried about that, and I think at a local council level there's so much we can do, and I'm also really excited about some of the work that Darebin Council has already done. I think local waste management solutions.
Candidate, you have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, cool. So basically one of my biggest passions is the aged care services, and I'm really passionate about Darebin home care services and protecting elderly people so that they can have good quality of life. I want to reduce red tape. I would also push always for Aboriginal recognition and inclusion and decision making, and I would advocate for renewed, beautiful and protected community spaces, more localised mental health and drug and alcohol support, and I will always with pride support the LGBTIQA community. And that's enough about me.
Thank you, Carmen. Before we move on to our next speaker, I'd like to make a note that we will be prioritising questions from audience members, not from candidates. So please, if you are in the audience this evening and you do have questions for candidates, do put them in the Q&A section. Susan Rennie, independent candidate for South Central Ward, you have the floor.
Thank you. Nyama, Warranjeri Woyuang Gulyin, Gun Ganinu Bik Weno up Darabandari, Nyariana Nyanga Bik Ban Ba Nyagu, Gagukal Nangit Bambu Thieling Boot Bat Gamaji. I acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I've been on council for 4 years now, and it's been quite an extraordinary experience and an extraordinary journey. And I absolutely love it because I've seen firsthand the ability of council to lead national conversations that I think will make this country a better place to live. I've got 3 examples that I will use to illustrate that. In December, we were the first council in the world to declare a climate emergency, and that has now sparked a movement of close to 2,000 councils, local governments and other levels of government across the world. We as a council stood up for First Nations peoples and said the 26th of January is not a suitable day on which to hold a national celebration, and that has sparked, along with a couple of other councils, a national conversation about what we should be celebrating and what we have very little to celebrate about at this point in time. And I think that's a conversation the country needs to have. And we've implemented the strongest gambling policy in Australia, which has seen our losses fall more than the losses in any other Victorian municipality. And I think that's really important because that is standing up for the health and well-being of our residents. And for me, that's mostly what council is all about. I have a background in public health, and my passion for council is that I can think of no better place to actually ensure that we build healthier communities for everyone who lives in Darebin, with particular focus on equity. So over the next 4 years, I want to begin the journey that I've started. And that means focusing not only on the delivery of exceptional services and infrastructure, such as a new pool for Northcote. It also means continuing to prioritise responding to the climate emergency. And that can be done both with local initiatives, like increasing our food waste collection to weekly, but also through the leadership that Darebin shows so well. For example, with the power purchase agreement arrangement that we are coordinating and leading for 47 councils across Victoria. It's the largest local government power purchase agreement for green power that we've ever seen. I think those examples illustrate why being on council, and not just any council, but being on Darebin Council, is such an amazing opportunity. And it is so because we have an amazing community. And I think I can't emphasize enough that
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. The alignment of our progressive community with amazing staff and councillors who want to further the progressive work that we do makes for a combination that I think will mean that Darebin continues to lead in many ways.
Thank you, Susan. Oliver Walsh, Liberal Party candidate for South East Ward, you have the floor.
Okay, well, hi everyone, and thanks for having me this evening. I would like to also acknowledge the traditional owners. Look, I'm a Liberal Party member, and I'm declaring that, but the Liberal Party, and I think it's appropriate that we don't endorse candidates, which means that ultimately we're responsible for and beholden to only the community rather than parties and party leaders, often who may never have legitimately been to Darebin in their life. So yeah, I'm an independent, but a Liberal Party member. Look, I'm a former councillor and who represented this community, and I represented the Rockall ward. And whilst I was on council, I was, a strong advocate for various environmental programs and recreation programs, such as I guess one example is I strongly advocated to build the bridge along Mary Creek, which was fantastic. Can everyone see me? Because I've just seen that someone saying they've lost the visual, so I hope people can still see me. And so I advocated to build the bridge along Mary Park, so along over the Mary Creek, sorry. The other thing, and also such things as the Northcote Aquatic Centre and the multi-purpose sports stadium. Outside of council, owned over the past 4 years, and I think this is really relevant to the discussion that we've had tonight about the COVID recovery and ensuring that no one's left behind. I've set up a not-for-profit organisation in the disability sector, which has been advocating for and has helped young people with disabilities find employment and work experience placements and mentorships with community leaders. And I think that's really important because and my concern with throughout this recovery has been, and the pandemic has been, what are we doing to make sure that people with disabilities are not going to be left behind? But we need to be kind of thinking about
30 seconds remaining.
Thinking about that, and so I think that gives me some great experience to bring to the forum tonight. But I'm also a law student at the moment, so that's me.
Thank you, Oliver. I'd also like to make a note to those attending the forum. We're getting a lot of general questions in the question space. If you wouldn't mind directing your questions to a specific candidate, we will pass on the general questions, but we won't have time this evening to do a roundtable for them each to answer. So if you could identify the candidate you'd like to answer your question, that would be very helpful. Moving on, Trent McCarthy, Greens candidate for Southwest Ward, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. The last 4 years of Darebin Council, and I've served as a councillor and had the privilege of serving as a councillor since 2008. And it's been an extraordinary time and an extraordinary privilege to do that. But over the last 4 years, I would second what Councillor Susan Rennie, current Mayor, has said. This council has led on national issues, but it has also delivered locally on the services that our community needs. You've heard about the first climate emergency declaration in the world, which I had the honour of putting forward. I've literally come from a meeting of Climate Emergency Australia, which I've championed the creation of. It's the 96 councils around the country that are basically working together in the absence of federal leadership to ensure that we have the climate emergency response that we need to keep our community safe. We know that the climate is the #1 issue facing the planet, but also facing our most vulnerable people and our environment. Darebin, and I think this is, I'm really proud as a Greens councillor, we took to the last election a series of policies. Every one of those, every one of our promises and policies was implemented. And looking ahead, I really want to focus on the fact that we have $500 million, $500 million, basically going to be invested by state and federal governments, state and local governments in Darebin. That is partly to do with the LXRP project in Preston, but also council's own procurement and capital works activity. It's essential that we see as much value extracted from those projects for local people through employment, through economic opportunity, through continuing to see that Darebin dollar circulate. If we can see even 15% of that income and that expenditure, that is an enormous amount of jobs, but I believe we can see a lot more. One of the things that we took to the election in 2016 was a commitment to create employment opportunities for young people. And I want to acknowledge the work of the Bridge, particularly through initiatives like Moonrabbit, to create those entry points to employment. Darebin, through the policy that we've adopted this term, now has a social and sustainable procurement policy that says that 10% of all the work that council delivers outside of the community and outside of its day-to-day operations through capital works programs and the like is actually provided for young people to undertake. So this means that every time Darebin spends money, it's literally creating work for young people, and we know how important that is. Looking ahead as well, we know
30 seconds remaining.
Our local businesses desperately need that investment. And so one of the things that as a councillor I would like to continue to advocate for if re-elected is to ensure that the state government actually creates the same local procurement commitment that Darebin has as well. I'll end it there, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Trent. Bryony Edwards, Save the Planet candidate for North East Ward, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay. Yep, and Mayor Susan Rennie mentioned that in 2016, Darebin Council actually changed the world when it passed a motion acknowledging that we're in a climate emergency. That simple action for me, it was like Obama getting elected, and I wept probably many times over that. Incidentally, much of the thinking behind that was from Philip Sutton, who is a candidate in this election for the Southeast Ward. But so COVID has shown us that business as usual can change, that neoliberalism can be put on hold. And the last time we had an example like this, a very different example, was probably World War II, where the issue that we had to solve was prioritised above everything else. And if you imagine it, every communication that came from the government was framed in terms of the war that we are fighting. No one ever forgot that there was a war on. So what we need now is just one of the 1,700 plus councils, state and federal governments that have acknowledged the climate emergency to mobilise or to act like the house is on fire. because that's what we need to save the planet. We need everyone, we need every level of government to mobilise. So councils don't have the big economic and regulatory levers, but they do have a huge portfolio with many little levers such as rates, roads, rubbish, and resilience building across the community. And I really love that Esther said, we need to cool our environment with, we need to cool the urban landscape. There's urban canopies and so many different things we can do. And councils together have all these little levers, but they also have economies of scale, such as with the clean energy power purchase that Darebin has so wonderfully promoted across the majority of Victorian councils that have signed up to this. Other issues I obsess about are neoliberal scoundrels, affordable housing for everyone, but I'm also strategising for a kinder, fairer, and of course a greener future. And while I'm a lefty, I really, I obsess about the fact that we really need a social safety net, and that is being taken away from us. So I'm a lefty, but I also value small business, and I really think small business is the lifeblood of our streets and our communities, or one of the lifebloods of our streets and our communities. Anyway, so Darebin has shown that a single council can change the world.
30 seconds remaining.
So now let's act like the house is on fire and save the planet. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Bryony. Lina Messina, independent candidate for North East Ward, you have the floor.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we stand on here this evening, pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, past, present and emerging. As you know, my name's Councillor Lina Messina, and I'm the current councillor at the Gazali Ward. I'm standing to re-elect at the for the Central Ward again as a candidate. I'm also a small business advocate. I believe, just like Bryony Edwards just mentioned, that the small businesses, whether they're home-based, whether they're retail-based, whether they're in services or they're in hospitality or the arts, is the micro-economy of our community. I'm currently working as a health and pandemic officer for a non-profit in the aged care community sector. I've been doing that role for 12 years in terms of working for the aged care non-profit, and I was escalated to the pandemic officer basically at the start of this particular year, and it found some challenges. I'm currently the only councillor that I believe is working full-time, so there has been a lot of challenges along the way, but I've embraced all the challenges because I found that during the journey of this particular term, I've been able to evolve myself. Not only has council evolved with their progressive policies, but also myself as an individual, I've also evolved. I'm an independent, and as I said, I'm a progressive independent. I recently became a grandmother, so that's pouring another basically curveball into my own resources that I need to evolve in terms of understanding what I need to do on a daily basis. To highlight my commitment to Preston and Central Ward, it didn't start this particular term to nominate. It didn't start 5 years ago, it didn't start 3 months ago. It actually started back in the 80s when I was a student at the Preston Technical School. I was the first student counsellor on that particular school, and I was also running a school breakfast program and a retail assistant also at the Preston Market. So my commitment to Preston didn't just start, it has evolved over time. I became a councillor because I believed the rumour about Preston Market closing, and I wanted to stop that. And then I didn't want to turn the Preston Market into a concrete jungle. And I don't know if many of you have seen the new images that are kind of be coming into fruition. Hopefully not. When we look at Bell and Preston Station itself at the moment is looking for turning into a concrete jungle. So I aim to stop that, obviously. I always look at policies through 3 different lenses. The first one is the social lens, and I also always apply the health, the gender, and the culture land on that particular lens, and in terms of how does it affect everybody, whether it's a community safety framework, how does it evolve, and how does it actually
Candidate, you
bring
have
everybody
30
together?
seconds remaining.
Oh, that's it. Moving forward, obviously, my platform is the waste microeconomy. I'm the chair of the local government waste forum. Also, I also want to lead into the graffiti tag register and look at sustainable development, looking at bee hotels and also electric charge stations, and making sure that multi-unit developments do have a recycling little microeconomy happening, because at the moment they're privatised and they're not collected by council. So all that waste is not audited and it's going to landfill. So my aim is to reduce waste to landfill. I know, and I'm really excited because Preston is going to evolve. So I'm looking forward to the Preston precinct, the evolution of the microeconomy with the injection of more and more small businesses working together with community and watching that into fruition. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Lina. Hugh Morris-Dalton, independent candidate for South Ward, you have the floor.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me tonight. Look, first of all, I would also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, who are the traditional owners of the land that I'm speaking from, and I assume most of us are attending from. I would also like to pay my respects to any First Nations people that are with us in this session tonight. And I would like to thank the Bridge for putting on this session and all the services that they provide. I think one of the reasons that I'm running for council is because first and foremost, council doesn't just collect rates and roads, and fix roads. They're a service provider, and by partnering with organisations like the Bridge, they provide a really valuable service to our community that changes people's lives. And I think I'm a lifelong resident of Darebin. I've gone to school locally. I went to Fairfield Primary and Northgate High, and as a young person, I've been buoyed by seeing the sort of the declaration of the climate emergency and seeing those actions start to be taken. But I think what's been lost along the way a little bit is that sort of engagement with the community and making sure that we're bringing everyone in the community along for that journey with us. And I think, I look at the climate initiatives, and I think it's fantastic that we've got programs like the Solar Saver program, which, gives access to solar systems for low-income households on the bulk buy, which is, subsidised rates and protection. But I look at that and I sort of wonder what's there for younger people and renters like myself who don't have the ability to install those systems. I think we need to think more broadly about how we can bring sustainability measures that sort of allow everyone to reduce their impact on the environment, because it is something that's really important. And I think, again, around the sort of service provision, I do think we need to have a diversity on council. I've been sort of disappointed to see the, councillors have been a little bit older and we haven't had that sort of focus on youth services, and I have seen a bit of a degradation over the last couple of years. Council runs some amazing youth services. They run the Decibels music program, they have social workers attend and work through the Rolling Darebin program, but I've seen less and less promotion of those, and those services are hard to know about and hard to access. But when people do access them, and my family's been lucky enough, my brother's put out 2 albums independently with the help of Darebin, and my sister has been involved with Roland Darebin. They lead to amazing outcomes, not just in sort of people's fields of interest, but they lead to employment outcomes that have been mentioned earlier, and they lead to a greater engagement in the community. And I think that's where we need to step up. Councillors need to be actively reaching out to different community organisations, schools, sports clubs, community organisations like the Bridge, to sort of bring people together and really promote their services in a different way. I think we're in this sort of COVID pandemic where, if you're like me, I check my mail once a week, except when I've been waiting for ballots.
30 seconds remaining.
And emails are going to people's spam folders. We need to think outside the box about how we engage the community, how we spread the message about what Darebin's doing, and how we sort of make sure that the community, everyone is being engaged, not just sort of the loudest voices or the most organised people, but we're making a really strong and concerted effort to sort of go out, make ourselves available and engage with people in the community. So that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Ali Hogg, Victorian Socialist candidate for Southwest Ward, you have the floor.
Hi there. So I'm Ali Hogg. As Ramona said, that I'm running in the Southwest Ward. I'd also like to acknowledge this is Indigenous land, and it always was and always will be Indigenous land. And I stand along all Indigenous people alongside them in their struggle for justice. And I think in the context of NAIDOC week coming up, I think we all need to make a commitment to stand strong and find ways to support the Indigenous community in their struggle for justice. I think that I come from a unique position running for council. I'm a queer woman, but more importantly, I'm an activist and a socialist. And I think that is important because I come from a background of fighting for rights, and I have seen what it's like to be a part of struggles and win. So one of the first things that I was involved in was a struggle to reinstate sessional staff at my university. And it was an unpopular campaign, but we tried to go via the status quo and we couldn't get anywhere. And then when we rocked the boat a little bit, we were able to reinstate all 18 of those sessional staff. So sometimes you need to be a little bit radical to see change. And I think that we've seen too much of the status quo and same old when it comes to politics. So I think when it comes to cuts, we need to really fight against cuts. We need to fight against privatisation. We've seen what the privatisation of aged care has done to during the COVID pandemic. I think it's been atrocious. So I think that we really need to deprivatise aged care. I think that we shouldn't be afraid to rock the boat. I think we need more affordable housing in Darebin. And I think that we certainly need to save the Preston market, and it shouldn't be moved off-site. It should stay exactly where it is. I think we need full rate relief, and specifically for people on JobKeeper and JobSeeker. And I also think rent relief is also important, particularly for people who have been impacted by COVID-19. I also come from a background of community development. So I work full-time in community development in a sector where we're feeding people who are being impacted by COVID-19. So I think with a mix of my history of activism, I think I failed to mention that I was also the head of the marriage equality campaign in Victoria, the activist wing of the marriage equality
30
campaign
seconds remaining.
that saw us get not only over 20,000 people out on the streets and regularly see thousands and thousands of people on the streets, but we saw the campaign come to victory, winning marriage equality. So I think I would be a great candidate, and I think that people should really consider voting for Socialists in this upcoming council election.
Thank you, Ali. Well, by some technical miracle, we got through all that okay. That concludes the speaker section of the evening. We'll now turn to question time. Again, we're going to do this in the same order that we did the speaking. So our first question is directed to Esther Kennedy, Greens candidate for Central Ward. Esther, given the Greens are sometimes criticised in Darebin as focusing on non-local issues, how will you deliver on your promises in such tight economic times post-COVID? Esther, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I think that there is a lot of opportunity over the next council term. There's going to be, we've got about $500 million worth of capital works in the next 5 years. That includes council capital works and also the level crossing removal project, which is major. There's so many opportunities to leverage that incredibly huge spend that's happening here in Darebin and make sure that there are local opportunities, that there are opportunities for small businesses to, you know, whether it's catering, whether it's, you know, different support services to the different workers that will be in the area, whether there are opportunities to ensure through Darebin's social and sustainable procurement policy, that there are jobs for young people and from other backgrounds that might not be as readily able to find employment. So I think it's about leveraging things that are already happening, making the most of them and getting the best for our local regional economy. Yeah, that would probably be a big focus. As you say, resources are tight, but there's going to be those projects and we should make sure that we get the most local output for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Our next question is directed to Louise Kenney-Shen, Labor Party candidate for North Central Ward. Louise, like many Darebin residents, I am very passionate about the protection of animals. In 2017, Darebin opened a new animal shelter in partnership with Moreland and Whittlesea councils. Darebin claimed that this council would be a no-kill shelter. However, the new pound provider has refused to cooperate with rescue groups and only makes a tiny handful of animals available to them. The kill rate for cats, for example, went from just 9% to 35.5% under the new provider. In other words, 4 times as many cats are being killed by the new provider. If elected, would you advocate for the pound contractor to uphold Darebin's stated commitment to a no-kill model and for rescue groups to regain the right to save the lives of animals who have been impounded by Darebin Council? This is my question for you, Louise. You have the floor.
Thank you. Unequivocally, yes, absolutely. I am a huge advocate for animal welfare and animal rights. My father is a vet. I grew up with, at one point, I think there was 13 different domestic pets running around the house. I'm a rabbit owner. I always get my rabbits from the shelter. There's a shelter down in Olinda, and they save rabbits from being killed in RSPCA shelters and other shelters that just, they give them 3 months and then they're gone. So I'm incredibly passionate about that, and I'm really sad to hear those figures, and if I do get elected, I'll be working really hard to make sure that that's changed and that those without voices are being recognised and being represented properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. The next question is directed to Isabel Jackson, Labor candidate for West Ward. Isabel, describe how you deal with bullying behaviour by fellow councillors towards each other if you are elected. Party candidates, what if the bullying councillor is from your own party? I might add, these questions are not from me, they're from audience.
Thanks. Yeah, I saw that question in the list. Bullying is something that I've been very familiar with throughout my life in various forms. Look, I just won't stand for it. I just don't stand for it. Like, seriously. And how would I deal with it? There are procedures, and I can get very what's the word? Strident, perhaps, on enforcing it. I believe that when I worked in galleries, people would say sometimes, what do you do with naughty children who come to visit your gallery? And I said, I don't know if they're deliberately naughty. Sometimes they're bored, they're tired, they're whatever. Be that as it may, but I'm not going to have them running around my gallery. I'll find some way of, my gallery, some way to modify their behaviour to take that away. Bullying, whatever people's issues are, yes, provides support to facilitate change of behaviour, but not having it. There's procedures, there's duty of care to other people. It has to be enforced. That's it. I get very intolerant about intolerance. That's my limit. So yes, I'd ensure procedures and policies are followed, basically.
Thank you, Isabel. The next question is directed to Carmen Lahiff-Jenkins, recent party candidate for North West Ward. Carmen, have you signed the Victorian Pride Lobby's pledge to support your local LGBTQI community? And if you have not, will you? Carmen, you have the floor.
Yeah, sorry, it just took a second. I have absolutely signed it. I certainly didn't hesitate. I wouldn't even consider that. I think supporting LGBTIQA people in our community is just a given, of course. And I think that also leads into that the diversity, the way that the community is made up of so many different groups, especially Darebin, and I know a lot of us are out letterboxing at the moment, and it's such a wonderful experience to be out there on the pavement. I'm just spewing that we're campaigning in COVID because you don't get that chance to speak one-on-one, but just be out in people's neighbourhoods, you know, see all the different things that, you know, make up people's homes and their lives. And, you know, the idea of rejecting any level of diversity makes me feel uncomfortable. I personally am autistic. I've diagnosed autistic, as are some of the members of my family. And one of the things about not being socially conditioned is that you learn to question those sorts of things. So I think that it's really, really important that, especially as candidates who want to represent a very broad community, and as somebody pointed out, sometimes diversity is lacking in these spaces. So it's really important to be able to be inclusive, I guess, and make sure that you're inclusive of a whole community and develop spaces so that people feel safe, not just lip service, but actually, you know, put in, and it's something that Isabel also said, putting in procedures and policies in spaces so that people can feel safe and accepted there. I guess that's my best answer. It was a pretty short question. So. Okay.
Thank you, Carmen. Our next question is directed to Susan Rennie, independent candidate for South Central Ward. Susan, currently there are no bike lanes marked along High Street between Dundas and Separation. Many cars treat this section of High Street as a two-lane road, with cars passing on the left-hand side of other cars, making it extremely dangerous for other vehicles and particularly cyclists. With recently announced increase to cycling lanes across inner Melbourne, how will you make this a priority, and what are your plans for upgrading other cycle laneways and streets to make it safer for cyclists? Susan, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm incredibly committed to improving safety for cyclists. I myself am a cyclist and I use Darebin's bike paths and also Darebin's roads on a regular basis. And the council that I've been part of for the last 4 years has really prioritised cycling safety with a number of Streets for People projects, which have actually aimed to increase cyclist safety and decrease traffic speed and flow across a number of routes that cyclists need to go. So these are often shimmy routes. High Street is difficult because it is a narrow street with a lot of competing demands. And council is looking at how we can improve safety on that location, but also how we can create alternative routes that make people feel safer in their north-south journeys. And those include Victoria Road and St George's Road. But we're also, and I'm really excited about this, actually looking at other projects with pop-up bike lanes at the moment, particularly down in Westgarth Street and on Heidelberg Road. And I think that those will present amazing opportunities for more people to get to work. And if we can put in place pop-up lanes as a response to COVID, it would be my hope that people will see the value in that more people will begin cycling, and we all know that it's actually a much better use of space. So I'm 100% committed to continuing with these projects and investing the money that is required to make cycling the preferred mode of transport for Darebin residents.
Thank you, Susan. Our next question is for Oliver Walsh, Liberal Party candidate for South East Ward. This is the question. I hope that I get it right. I'm not quite sure about this question. If you're elected, will you consider changing the allocation of the $100 off rates as shown on my rates notice? If so, how and why? Oliver, you have the floor. Is Oliver still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Yep, okay. Sorry, I was having a few technical difficulties, but that's what 2020 is about, I think. Sorry, could you repeat that question?
I can. If you are elected, will you consider changing the allocation of the $100 off rates as shown on my rates notice? If so, how and why?
Yes, and look, what we do need to look at is we do need to look at rates. We do need to look at rates relief that in this particular time, and I do think it was regrettable, and I do think it's an error that this council made an error in increasing rates this year. To be if I'm honest, I think in a pandemic year it would have been a fantastic thing to to say to the community, because say to the community, we've had to tighten our belts too, and we're going to be so I may have misinterpreted the question. I'm trying to do the question justice, but I did get I have just got something on the okay, so yes, okay, so it's about how the it's about how money's spent. Okay. Okay, sure. Thanks for that. Yeah, so look, we council council needs to be council does need to be frugal with how money is spent, and it can be done through things like reducing the amount of consultants that are being paid by council, and there's a whole lot of things when you actually go through a fine-tooth comb, which can be efficiencies that can be found without reducing services.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm sorry that you had to clarify that question. It was a bit confusing for us here. Yeah. Right, so our next question is for Trent McCarthy, Greens candidate for Southwest Ward. Trent, it is inevitable as Darebin grows, so will the need for housing. Could you give your view on how you'll manage planning applications from developers, particularly when it comes to high-rise approvals and the impact this will have on transport capacity? I feel there is a particular bias to youth and families in this ward. What provisions are being made for retirees and the aged who are being significantly impacted by development? After all, they are and have been major contributors to rates and the growth of the area. Trent, you have the floor.
What a fantastic question. We do have a need, and I think it's an urgent need, in fact, with not only a growing population, which is largely dictated by state policy, which then impacts on the Darebin planning scheme, but also obviously by an ageing population. And we know that over the next decade, we are going to have a significant proportion of our community enter what is described as the old age group, which is an unusual term, but it's used in the aged care industry and the aged care sector in local government, which is people who would like to and hopefully are able to continue to age in place and to stay in their homes, to be well supported by council facilities. One of the things that Age Friendly Darebin talks about is the importance of continuing to support and stay connected with older people in our community. And 98 recommendations, one of which actually talks about how we can make sure that this is a community that is not only inclusive, but supportive and engaging for older people in our community. One of the challenges with planning and development applications, and I think the question really goes to that, is how do we manage the balance as a city in relation to the applications that come through that can be medium to high density applications. These are not necessarily things that council has direct control over, because it makes decisions in relation to the Planning and Environment Act and the Darebin planning scheme. But what is really important is that we actually continue to provide housing that is inclusive, that is available for people, particularly older women. I just would note that older women are the most vulnerable people in the housing market, and particularly those who have worked in care sectors. So looking at models that are social models that are based on social housing, that are actually based on collaboration and collective models, is exactly the way to go. We've had a few of those in development, and I'm really pleased that Darebin Council has had the first affordable housing project on its own land in this term, which is actually just behind the Preston Town Hall. Those are the models that are going to continue to ensure that we are able to help people age in place and continue to be an inclusive community.
Thank you, Trent. Our next question is for Bryony Edwards, Save the Planet candidate for North East Ward. Bryony, with communities spending more time outside for recreational activities, would you consider adding in additional facilities such as permanent table tennis tables or netball hoops in small parks and reserves? This would encourage COVID-safe practices in our new COVID normal space. Bryony, you have the floor.
Thanks. Yeah, who wouldn't want table tennis tables and badminton courts and things like that in our parks? And I think, you know, many people who are lucky enough to have worked through COVID have now realised they can work from home, and will probably continue working from home a lot of the time, even when lockdown's over. You know, the CBD is going to empty out. There's going to be all this empty real estate. Our world is, our landscape, our physical landscape is going to change quite a lot. And I think we need to cater for more people, fewer people being commuters. They're going to be hanging around the communities, and how we make that work with our current amenities. And yeah, COVID's shown us that we love being outside, we love green spaces, and we really need to do more to enhance them. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bryony. Our next question is for Lina Messina, independent candidate for North East Ward. Lina, there are many questions about the Northcote Golf Course. What do you see as the best use of the land currently occupied by the golf course? How would you engage in transparent community consultation to determine its best use? Lina, you have the floor.
Great question. A lot of that, and I've received lots of emails that particular question. At this particular time, we've spent significant work, number one, in the open space at upgrading Penders Park, number two, upgrading and looking at the master plan for Mayors Park. I'm also aware that there are significant areas of the other part of the municipality that need addressing in terms of open space. I'd like to see a needs analysis undertaken of what the usage of the golf course compared to the having it open for open space. So I think I need more information. One simply cannot make a result or deliver an outcome based on a question such as that. I think we need more outcomes that are going to be directed by data, and it can't be just by one person wanted it to be used in open space. I would love for it to be used as open space, but I need to have a look at the budget and have a look at a needs analysis based on the gaps that are associated with the rest of the municipality, just not for Northcote. If it just simply means that the golf course gets shut down and then we can use that space and have that available for the community, I'm happy to address that, and that can be done quite quickly. But if it's more subjective to a needs analysis based on who's actually currently using it, what the gaps are in the municipality, and then that's when the decision will be made. So I'm not going to sign away anything until there is some evidence outcome based on decision and transparency and inclusiveness of what the community wants. And that's not just the community that will be represented by a small group, it's a community at large, because I think I'd like to hear more about more community consultation. We don't get enough of that, and I'd like to have that more addressed into the wider municipality, not just the particular ones that are the loudest in the community.
Thank you, Lina. Our next question is directed to Hugh Morris-Dalton, independent candidate for South Ward. Hugh, if you were elected, how would you see council managing the ongoing parking problems in central Preston with the continued high density housing growth? Hugh, you have the floor.
Thanks for that question. Look, I think it's a really good one. I think obviously parking is a bit of a hot potato across the council on the back of what took place last year and the sort of community backlash against that parking policy that was going to be a sort of uniform approach across large areas of the council. In regards to Central Preston, I think what's really important and what Lina's sort of touching on there is consultation and having a very specific and individualised approach that's informed by data and the way people use it. I think, you know, it's easy to sort of broad brush strokes and say we should have a 2-hour parking limit, but looking at what the sort of permit structure is and the sort of the makeup of that area, that's going to allow sort of, you know, give priority to residents who are living there within the, you know, the reason of the cars they need to live, but also making that area accessible to, you know, people visiting the area. I think it's a difficult balance to find, and what needs to be done is that people need to be spoken to first. I think we've seen what doesn't work is going away and creating a policy sort of separate from any consultation process. We need to make sure we're engaging with the local residents there, understanding what the needs of sort of the broader community that are accessing that area, and then use that to sort of inform an approach that's going to sort of reach the best balance between those sorts of needs. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Our next speaker, our next question is directed to Ali Hogg, Victorian Socialist candidate for South West Ward. Ali, another question came in about the plans to balance appropriate development with creating affordable housing. Would you like to address this question, please, Ali? You have the floor.
Is that working? Yeah, cool. So yeah, I think that in order to have affordable housing, as well as I think it's really important that there's strict quality assurance standards, and like when people are building things. So it's not that there's a strict ban on development. I think that we need to stop the type of development where we're seeing where there's like overdevelopment and the development of apartments that just don't last the test of time and that are built so terribly that and people can't afford. So I think that it's really important that those standards consider safety, they consider how environmentally friendly the buildings are, and also how affordable they are. And affordable doesn't mean making them built to be dirt cheap and to fall apart. I think that it's really important to recognize that you can make affordable housing. And I think that it's important, like we've seen some really good examples of social housing that is environmentally friendly and safe and lasts the test of time around the world. And I think that it is not that hard to do. I think we just need council to stop sucking up to major developers and stop. And I think that it's good that a lot of people want to stop donations from the major developers, but I think that it's still pretty gross how much they're able to get an in with councils, and not just Darebin Council, but across the board. And I think it's something that we need to challenge if we want to see affordable housing and if we want to see housing that is more sustainable.
Many thanks to all of our speakers. We now have time to have closing remarks. There'll be 60 seconds for each candidate in the same 1 to 11 order. Esther Kennedy, Greens candidate for Central Ward, you have the floor.
Thank you. So this is obviously a really crucial local government election because of where we are here at the end of 2020. We've really seen all the cracks in our society and our economy, because so many groups in our Darebin community need more support than ever. Community services such as Bridge Darebin are more relevant than ever, and because we're spending more time in and around our homes, you know, we're here and using all of our local amenities. So I'd like to thank the Bridge for this forum, but also really thank all of the attendees who have come, and to all the residents out there who are taking this really seriously and are really reading up on what the candidates have to offer. and to really evaluate the choices that they make at this election. And I really hope to see overwhelming vote. The vote is a real mandate for solutions and vision and compassion. Whoever those candidates end up being, are the ones who are elected end up being. I really hope it's 9 people who are positive, solutions-driven councillors with great visions for Darebin. So that's my statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther, for your contribution this evening. Our next speaker, Louise Kenney-Shen, Labor Party candidate for North Central Ward. You have the floor.
Thanks, Ramona, and just thank you to Bridge for putting this on. It's a really great opportunity to see other candidates from other wards that we might not interact with as much. Now, my closing remarks are pretty simple. I just want to get in there and get it done. I think that there are a lot of issues at the moment around COVID recovery and around keeping our spaces safe and the places that we want them to be as we recover. And I think that it's really important for all of Darebin to come together as the great progressive municipality that we are, in order to make sure that we're all in this together, we're all walking forwards together, not looking back at past grudges or any sort of bad blood that might be there, and just moving on with the job as a council and getting what needs to be done. So that's making sure that our amenities and our services are well funded and providing the service that they need to be providing for the citizens of Darebin, and also making sure that our city is performing at a really high level. I think we've got the capability, we just need to grab hold of it and do it.
Thank you, Louise, for your contribution this evening. Isabel Jackson, Labor candidate for West Ward, you have the floor.
Hi, my closing comments are echoing things that Esther and Louise just said. I heard a commentator refer to the COVID pandemic as being like an X-ray on society, showing up all the cracks and deficiencies that in the normal practice aren't observed. And I think that's what we've really seen. My approach to things is a get things done, but I often see where solutions, in the effort to get things done, solutions presented without thinking through the issues. I would like to, as a councillor, focus on the detail within that bigger context and make sure the bigger context also addresses the detail, because for me, this is what local government's about. It's about the detail of our daily lives. We live in local areas. It's about our footpaths, parks, amenities that have been spoken of, and those community settings, as I mentioned earlier, the physical infrastructure, but also the intangible that's generated throughout that. And this is really what lived culture is all about. I've lived in Darebin since 2003, moved up from St Kilda, yay. And I think this is something that's very special, but we need to keep it vital.
Thank you, Isabel, for your contribution this evening. Our next speaker, Carmen Lahiff-Jenkins, Reason Party candidate for North West Ward. You have the floor.
Thanks very much. Look, I'd like to say that, just as my final thing, that running for council, just being a candidate has been such an excellent experience. I've really, really enjoyed it. Bullying and the difficulties and the kind of, I think Darebin can probably get a bit ugly. I think that's our reputation, which is unfortunate, because most of the people that I've spoken to are passionate, excited people who really want to do well for our government. And I think passion isn't the only thing that we need. I think what we really need is to have people that are able to consider things using an evidence-based lens, so that we are making policies and developing supports, etc., for our community that are what our community need and want, with community consultation, but also with stakeholders. So I'd really like to see whoever wins, whoever gets in, I hope that they're the best candidate for the job. I know for myself, I've been bitten by a bug where I want to be more and more involved in my community. So whether I get it or not, I'm really excited about the people I've met and the things I've been able to do. But I hope that the people that, you know, end up running council will be people that are going to be able to really bring evidence to the play, evidence to the fore, and really do what's best for the community as a whole, us up here in Reza as well.
Thank you, Carmen, for your contribution this evening. Our next speaker, Susan Rennie, independent candidate for South Central Ward. You have the floor.
Thank you. And I'd like to start by thanking the Bridge Darebin for providing this opportunity for community members to hear from candidates and have this conversation. I think it's such an important one to have. I'd like to ask for your vote if you're in South Central Ward, because I believe I've demonstrated an ability to show the sort of leadership that Darebin needs and to remain positive and engaged and connected with the community. And I think that's what we should be looking for in every councillor, is a positive outlook, collaborative teamwork skills, the ability to work with colleagues, and the ability to convey a vision for the municipality, a positive vision, to communicate with residents. And I think these are the skills that I have demonstrated, and they've been acknowledged, I believe, by my colleagues on council in that they've voted for me to be the mayor for the last 2 years. So I really hope that I can continue my work on council. I believe there is so much more to do, and I look forward to being part of a new council team after the elections in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for your contribution this evening. In closing, Oliver Walsh, Liberal Party candidate for South East Ward, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Can I just also say thank you to Bridge for hosting this evening, and because I think that these community forums are fantastic, because what it shows is, I think, regardless of one's individual politics, whatever background, whatever political background they may be from, you know, I think everyone is passionate about their community, and no candidate, if they're being honest, has all the ideas, and you know, every candidate has something to offer. So I think the potential that can come out of events like that, like tonight, can really be fantastic, because we can have a conversation with the community, and whoever's in the new council, you know, if, for example, if I'm in the new council, I would hope that I pick up some ideas that I've heard from other candidates, and because, you know, a whole lot of candidates made fantastic valid points tonight. And and have done in statements and have done in material and whatever. And I think that is something that's fantastic. And yeah, and if you're in South East Ward, I would love your vote.
Thank you, Oliver, for your contribution this evening. And now to hear from Trent McCarthy, Greens candidate for South West Ward. You have the floor.
Thanks, Ramona, and thank you to both you and to Chris and the whole team at the Bridge. I'm really pleased. One of the things that myself and my Greens colleagues ran on in the last election was to not only to support our neighbourhood houses, but in fact to actually give them what they need to do the incredible work that they do at the grassroots in our community, which is long-term funding agreements and of course an increased funding package, but as well as that, the opportunity to do projects. I wanted to highlight one of the projects that the Bridge has led as an example of what I hope the next council will do, which of course is Moon Rabbit. And Moon Rabbit is a fantastic example of a place-based response to social disadvantage, to supporting young people, economic action at the local level. And it's about the sort of thing which community can do to deliver an outcome, not just for locals in terms of having a great place to visit, but for young people who are facing the biggest challenge in terms of entry to the workforce that young people have faced in decades. The youth labour market has collapsed, we've put in place a policy that actually supports young people to get those jobs, and the Bridge and Moonrabbit and these sorts of initiatives are the pathway to doing that. So I really want to just ask everyone to make sure, and I'd like all council candidates to commit to continue to supporting neighbourhood houses, and I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Trent, for your kind words and your contribution this evening. And now to hear from Bryony Edwards, Save the Planet candidate for North East Ward. You have the floor.
Hi, yeah, first of all, I'd like to say hats off to the current council and the councillors here for the incredible work you've done over the last 4 years. And just walking around some of the streets now, I can see a lot of new trees that weren't there. A lot has happened over the last 4 years, and I really appreciate it. I'd love to be involved in the council going forward. I'd love to be in the council going forward and take it through the climate emergency. Hopefully we'll restore a safe climate sometime in the distant future. Thanks.
Thank you, Bryony, for your contribution this evening. Lina Messina, independent candidate for North East Ward, you have the floor.
Sorry, you're on mute, Lina.
Apologies. I'm actually a candidate for the Central Ward, so I just want to amend that. I want to say thank you to Chris and the team, and to the residents and to the candidates that are also speaking tonight. It's been great actually sitting back and watching the evolution of Moonrabbit, and I just want to echo the words that my fellow councillor Trent McCarthy stated. The most important thing for me is to ensure that we maintain basic services but excel on those basic services. Where the directive from the government at the moment is that we also go outdoors more. And when I looked at the map and to look at the inequities of what's actually taking place with more of the social activity outdoors, is that part of the municipality doesn't actually have bike repair stations, and part of it does not have water stations. So these are some of the lenses that I'd like to put moving forward. The directives outdoors. So how do we engage and ensure those gaps are identified and we fill those gaps based on that needs analysis? I will not entertain any politics like the current Soapgate politics, and I'm sure you've all seen that. I'm being a team player, being a team member, and being progressive in a collaborative way, not in a destructive way. There are so many strengths and diversity in terms of this particular council. Everybody brings different lenses, and we don't all have the same lens, and that's what makes it unique, that we all look at different issues with a different lens. I'm very, 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 very excited that Darebin was one of the first councils to introduce the banning of single-use plastic items, and that was my notice of motion that was included back in 2017. And based on that notice of motion, I was able to chair the local government waste forum, and that notice of motion then went through Australia-wide and then was introduced into the Mornington and Bayside Peninsula. So those councils took on that initiative and banned single-use plastic items along the beach sides and in their
Thank you, Lina. I had 60 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation again.
Thank you, Lina, and apologies for that mistake from the Central Ward. Thank you for your contribution this evening. And now to hear from Hugh Morris-Dalton, independent candidate for South Ward. You have the floor.
Sorry, so there we go. Starting. Yeah, so look, similarly just wanted to thank the Bridge for having us. I think it's a really great organisation, and if I was elected to council, I'd be continuing that support. I'm very excited to be able to go to the Moonrabbit truck just down the road from me tomorrow to get my morning coffee. Look, I'm asking any residents of South Ward for their vote, because I think it's really important that council has independent, local and diverse voices. And obviously I'll be bringing the perspective of sort of young people, my engagement there, but I mean, as other people have mentioned, it's really important that councils work together collaboratively to get what's best for the community, and sort of being able to do that from a an independent standpoint, rather than having to vote along party lines or have some of that, ugly fighting that we've seen between parties go on is what's going to generate the best outcomes for our community. And look, I'm going to be bringing a perspective that makes sure we're putting the community first, engaging at all opportunities, and really, as we come out of lockdown, making sure Darebin Council does everything it can to bring our community together and really strengthen those connections. So thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you for your contribution this evening. Ali Hogg, Victorian Socialists candidate for Southwest Ward, you have the floor.
Cool. Thank you, Bridge, as well, and thanks to everybody else for taking the time to come here today. As somebody it's my first time running, and it's been quite an experience, but I wouldn't be doing it for nothing, and I'm doing it because I think politics in Australia needs a shake-up, and that includes on a council level. I think that we need fresh blood and someone that's willing to challenge the status quo, and I think we need people that are prepared to rock the boat a little bit, and I'm prepared to do that. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And so yeah, I think if you want to challenge things a bit, if you want to a party, if you want a Darebin that puts people above profit, then I really strongly encourage you to vote for Victorian Socialists and vote for me if you're in the Southwest Ward. And yeah, and I also, some of the people have been asking questions about post-COVID. I think that that's not looking likely yet, but I think hopefully we can be a part of more campaigns where we can also, I think that it would be great if council could use their power to put pressure on big politics. So for on issues of climate change, refugee rights, and broader major political issues, because I think that council can have more of a role to play, and I think that that can have a flow-on effect on a better Darebin.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you for your contributions this evening. Many thanks to all of our candidates. We will now have closing remarks from Bridge Darebin CEO, Chris Lombardo. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. I too echo Ramona's thanks to all of you. Particularly want to thank all the community attendees this evening. It's been wonderful seeing how many people have joined us to learn a little bit more about the candidates for Darebin Council. Having been in the neighbourhood house sector for 19 years here in Darebin, I'm incredibly proud of the work that neighbourhood houses do. And I can see that there has been a question in the chat tonight from the chair of the Neighbourhood House Network in Darebin. And it's not a question that I'm asking you now, but she's asking if the incumbent candidates would like to send her an email. She's interested to hear about the thoughts on the continued support for neighbourhood houses and also diverse. I think diverse and the 7 neighbourhood houses have shown the sort of, I guess, the sort of fortitude that neighbourhood houses have, and the staff that work in our sector. We've really come to the fore during COVID-19, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done, and we've done it because we've wanted to do it. But we are crucial to the connection in our community, and there's no doubt that, you know, when we start to come out of COVID-19, that there'll never be a greater dependence like in the past as there will be in the future on organisations like ours. So we've been very fortunate. The current council have been incredibly supportive of neighbourhood houses. As Trent and Lina both mentioned earlier, and Susan, I think we've been very fortunate. And I would ask any incumbent candidates that when you first start in your role, amongst the other million things you need to do, please pop down and see all of your neighbourhood houses when you're allowed to, because I think you'll be surprised with what we do. So I'll close with that this evening. I wish you all the very best, and look forward to seeing the new council in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Just to let you all know that tonight's proceedings have been recorded. We're going to add a link to our website and our Facebook page tomorrow. that concludes our virtual forum for this evening. I'd like to extend my thanks to all the candidates and wish them luck in equal measure for the upcoming election. On behalf of Bridge Darebin, thank you all for coming and good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, adios, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing show. You moderated so well, Ramona. It was just awesome.
Yeah, really great.
Nice
Well done.
meeting you.
Thanks. Thanks,
job.
everyone.
Thanks,
ya.
everyone.
Bye.
They've done
Bye,
good. They've done
Bye.
good.